Hotel. Welcome back, everybody, to Matthew Daniels TV. Once again, we are going to be allowing the ancestors to speak. We're going to be digging into our ancestral records, and we're going to be bringing some of this stuff out. Y'all see the title of this video today. We're going to be talking about medicine and magic and hoodoo practices, eye doctors on the plantation. This one is going to be a really good one. So buckle up. I got a lot of information to share with you guys. Just give me a second to get the PowerPoint presentation started and make sure my audio is good. And we're going to get off into the information. Just do me a favor. Make sure when you come in the building, as always, hit that like button. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And when you subscribe, hit that little notification bell so you could be notified whenever I go live, or you could be notified whenever I release a new video. Okay, so today what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be taking you into some of the records of our ancestors, and I'm going to be showing you guys that when we're talking about hoodoo and when we're talking about root work, when we're talking about conjuring, etc., it's all not mystical, magic, spiritual, religious information. A lot of it is actually practical information. It's just defined in a different way. Joyce Francis says, hello, so happy to be here. Hey, and I'm so happy to have you as well. Thanks for tapping in. I appreciate it. I hope you're having a good day. I hope you're having a great week. And I hope all is well with you and your family. For real, hotel. So, what I want to explain is that sometimes when we're talking about root work and we're talking about hoodoo and even what they're calling magic is actually medicine, right? These roots that they were using, these herbs that they were using, these plants that they were using them for medicinal purposes. They were using it to heal fevers, heal sickness and disease, cholera, yellow fever. They were using it to treat broken bones. They were using it to treat abrasions. They were using it to treat cuts and lacerations. And in a lot of ancient practices, there wasn't a real big difference between what we call science and medicine today and magic, because they were looking at it as in a few people who we would call doctors today. They were looking at them as being magic because they had the power to heal. Normally, if an individual begins to go blind, if no one intervenes, right? If no one intervenes and does something to figure out what is actually causing the blindness and then find some type of medicinal solution to heal that blindness, they go blind. But if someone can come in and they can create something that they can put on your eyes, or create something that they can give you to drink or take, and it will heal your sight, then that person would be viewed as if they have some type of supernatural powers. A lot of these ancient stories that we read about, like miracles and healings and stuff like that, they are just putting a spin on certain real world medical practices. But the ancient mind is a lot different from the modern mind with modern science and modern medicine. And so, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into some of the records and I'm going to show you an actual individual who was enslaved, but they had this medical knowledge and they were using this medical knowledge to cure people who were going blind from some disease that they did not know what that disease was. Okay. And to the individual, 100, 200 years ago, when they saw someone be able to go out into the woods, get roots and herbs and dirt and mix things together and cure someone of going blind, they associated that with that individual having some type of supernatural power. But again, a lot of times that quote unquote supernatural power, it was just medicine, right? It was just medicine. So I'm going to show you guys an example of that. and just allow the ancestors to speak, show you exactly what they were talking about. But before I actually get into the story of the individual who actually could cure blindness, I want to show you an example of what I'm talking about. Now, this again is from the quote unquote slave narratives or the oral histories. The individual that gave this information was actually enslaved themselves, and they got their freedom during the Civil War. Okay. Now, what this individual is going to describe, we're going to be able to see that they're talking about medicine and healing, right? But this would have also been viewed as hoodoo and root work because they're using roots and herbs, etc. Look what they say. Oh, the peoples didn't never worry about no doctor then. They doctor was in the field in that time. I's gonna tell you just like I know it. All the older peoples used to get the herbs out the old fields for their remedies. So what they're talking about is individuals being able to go out into the woods and find things that they could use to make medicine. Now the powerful thing about this is because everybody didn't know what roots and herbs to use for different sicknesses, different illnesses. They didn't know what to combine with what. So again, this individual that did have this knowledge, their knowledge seemed to supersede or surpass the knowledge of the everyday individual. Look, they go on to say, my massa and the missus was the ones what doctor mostly in them times. Used to get old field ringdom, what smelled like this here mint, and boil that and let it steep. That was good to sweat a fever and cold out you. So they're telling you that if an individual had a fever, right, or if an individual had a cold, they would use a root that was known as old field ringdom. And this root had a smell like mint. And they would boil that particular root, and then they would give you that root, administer that root to you, and that's what they would particularly use for a fever or a cold. Remember, yeah, we have synthetic medicines today, but before an individual advanced to the point to where we could create synthetic medicines, all medicine was just made from what you could dig up out the ground. That's the natural basis of all medicine. All medicine is what you get out of the ground. All medicine is quote unquote root work, all of it. Look, they say, then there was life everlasting tea that was good for a bad cold, and cherry bark, what would make the blood so bitter, no fever never couldn't stand it. So this is another remedy which would be considered hoodoo, root work, conjuring, etc. But this is another medicinal remedy for fever and a cold. They're telling you about something that they call life everlasting tea, and they're talking about something that's called cherry bark. Now, again, these are things that you find in nature, right? Things that you find in nature. They go on to say, them what had the rheumatism had to take that lion's tongue, or what some people's calls wintergreen tea, and some of the time they take pine top and mix with the herbs to make a complete cure. So now they're talking about rheumatism. I believe rheumatism is something like arthritis, right? So there's some type of herb, some type of plant, some type of root that they call lion's tongue. There's something that they call wintergreen tea. Obviously, they're getting some kind of root, they're boiling it to make a drink out of it, and they're having something that they're calling pine top, which is also a herb that they would use to cure or treat something that is known as rheumatism. So if an individual on a plantation was suffering from these diseases, they would go to the quote unquote conjurer, but that person wouldn't, like, pray over them, lay a hand on them, and heal them through, like, literal supernatural means. Now, they did believe that that was possible, but they would actually go to them how we go to the doctor today. You go to the doctor, you tell them about what symptoms you're suffering, they run particular tests, and then they prescribe you the medicine. That's what we're seeing here. Look, they also say, oh, they make it bad as day could so as to weaken the case. Another thing that been good for the rheumatism was that red oak bark that they used to bathe the limbs with. Willow tea was something good for chilling fever, and catnip and sage tea was the thing for babies. Now, I'm not going to go into this in this video, but I've done it in some of my other videos, and I may do further videos on it later. But the crazy thing is, if you actually research some of these names, willow tea, catnip and sage, wintergreen tea, cherry bark, everlasting tea, O-ring fieldum. If you look up those roots and herbs, and you determine, okay, what are they talking about? That's the first step, because the names that they're using may not be the names that we're using today. But if you find out what those names are, what roots and herbs those are, what is called today, and you look at if it can be used to treat the stuff that they're saying it can be used to treat, you're going to be surprised, because you're going to realize that, oh, they actually still use this stuff in some shape or form today, and modern medical science attests to the fact that it can be used for this. For a fact, I did a video about that cherry bark being associated with dealing with a fever. That is a fact. So the question that we have to ask ourselves, how did these people know which roots and herbs to use for different sicknesses? Okay, now this individual that gave us this record, they actually knew a lot of these remedies, so we know that either they were a root worker themselves, or they were close to one, and they had all of the ingredients committed to memory. They could make these medicines, right? So, but I just want to show you that, to show that this hoodoo, conjuring, root work is not just superstitious magic. Yeah, a lot of it is superstition. I'm not gonna front. A lot of it is just straight up magic, cast a spell on you type magic. That's real. But there's a deeper element to it, which is the origin of it is medicine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into it, and I'm going to show you one of these hoodoo root workers that could actually cure blindness, and they created a cure that would save someone who was going blind from a disease. This is going to be real interesting. Watch this. Now, before I get into that, because I do like to give you guys some of the history, I want to point out something, that this connection to magic and medicine, right? Science and religion being mixed, this didn't begin with hoodoo. It's as old as time. I keep showing you this stuff goes back, or this information, this knowledge goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. A lot of this stuff is actually documented right there in Egypt and Africa. So some of these are African practices that have been just, passed down, passed down, passed down, passed down for literally millenniums. Now, the world's first eye doctor, first recorded eye doctor, there may have been more, but we know documented history, the world's very first eye doctor was an individual named Erie, who lived in ancient Egypt. Joyce Francis says, absolutely, the original medicine. Bam. Exactly. That's what it was. Okay. So look, the world's first eye doctor was an individual named Erie. Okay. And look, I got this off of researchgate.com. And so I'm going to read you what they say about Erie. But what you also see on your screen is you actually see the stele itself, the primary document that dates back to around 2400 BCE. That's 4,400 years ago, which tells us this man's name and tells us that he is an eye doctor. So yes, I'm finna read some stuff from ResearchGate, but I also have on the screen the primary document. It's just that we cannot read the metal letter. Some people can, or the hieroglyphics. Some people can, we can't. So we have to read what the people who translated it say about it. Now check this out. They say the first eye doctor known to have existed seems to be Eri, a royal occultist who lived during the 6th Egyptian dynasty around 2400 BCE. Now, they're calling him an occultist. Why? Because in ancient Egypt, the individuals that worked as doctors, they were also like the priest. Okay, they also perform rituals, and they perform what we call today like Egyptian magic. So this concept of being a magician, knowing magic, that has always back thousands of years have tied in with literal medical practices. It's just how they described it. So look, they say this article will briefly reflect the information available about Erie and his achievements. He said, not only were there many physicians in the pyramid age, meaning when they built those three great pyramids of Egypt, there were many different physicians in ancient Egypt, but there were also very specialized ones. The sixth dynasty court physician and high priest, he's a physician and a priest, Eri was not only doctor to the king's belly, shepherd of the king's anus, but also the king's eye doctor, meaning he was trained in several fields. If an individual was having some type of stomach problem, they would go to Erie. He was the doctor that dealt with that. If they were having problems, it says king's anus, but don't get lost. They're talking about like digestive problems, problems with your colon, etc., etc. The belly is connected to the digestive tract. So he's the doctor to the king's belly, shepherd of the king's anus, but he's also the king's eye doctor. This is what it literally says on the primary document. So we're talking about a doctor who specializes in multiple fields. It says his stele was discovered in a tomb near the great pyramid of Cheops. That's the largest pyramid over there in Egypt. They say that it was built by Pharaoh Cheops or Pharaoh Khufu. Erie described several eye diseases, but did not offer remedies. Now, on his stele, he describes these eye diseases, but he doesn't necessarily describe the remedies to them. But we know he had remedies to these diseases because he's the eye doctor. He's not just telling you what's wrong with the eye, he's actually working on the eye. But he didn't actually have this written on this particular stele. Why? Because some of the times this information was closely guarded. He wasn't just going to tell everybody what he's using, how he's using it, how he's actually doing his particular craft. You had to actually be in that field to learn the craft. Now we have the internet. You can go on the internet and look up almost anything. But realistically speaking, I can know that someone is a brain surgeon, right? I can know that someone is a brain surgeon, but I have no idea how they do what they do. I can know someone is an optometrist, but I have no idea how they do what they do. And if I wanted to find out how they do what they do, I would have to go to school and learn the trade, learn the craft. So the only individuals who would have found out how Erie was healing these eye diseases, they would have to join that particular priesthood that he was a part of, join that guild, that craft, and then they would be taught the secrets of that craft, and they would know how to heal those particular eye diseases. And the fact that he listed several different eye diseases, that shows you the how we practice medicine, the way in which we practice medicine today. The individual comes, they'll tell you symptoms. Based on those symptoms, you'll say what's wrong with them. He didn't just say, oh, everybody, you got bad eyes, you got bad eyes. No, they had categories. This is what's wrong with this disease. Is one disease, you treat it one way. This disease is another disease, you treat it this way. This disease is another disease, you treat it this way. So look, they say, interestingly to note, Idri was the ancient word for eyes or to see. So his actual name itself is associated with the craft that he was in. Conclusion: doctors who specialized in ophthalmology, working with the eyes, were regarded extremely high in Egyptian society and were the pride of many pharaohs. Today, very little is known about Erie, the first eye doctor. Many of scientific traditions of the Greeks were probably derived from the cultures of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Much has been attributed to Greek scientists because they were the first who left records of their achievements. And obviously they're not the first, because you can find some of this stuff in Egypt. You can look up the Ebers Papyrus. That's a medical document that predates anything Greek. But when they talk about medicine, they say that the father of medicine was Hippocrates. That's why most doctors, when they come into the field, they take something that's called the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath is based off of a Greek man named Hippocrates, who they try to say is the world's first doctor. But we see like 2,000 years before that guy even existed, you got Erie, who is a doctor to the king's belly, shepherd of the king's anus, and the king's eye doctor. Now, the thing about ancient Egypt is they had specific doctors who specialized in specific fields, just like you have today. You got brain surgeons, you got heart surgeons, you got gastro doctors who deal with your intestines and whatnot. You got doctors that deal with your limbs. There's specialized doctors for specialized fields depending on what's wrong with you. They had those same designations in ancient Egypt: eye doctors, stomach doctors, nose doctors, ear doctors, heart doctors, brain doctors. They had it all. And these doctors were also priests, they were also spiritual advisors, and the sciences and quote unquote magic were always mixed into one. Now, this way of viewing things, of magic being mixed with science, was literally passed down for thousands and thousands of years. Okay. And just to give you one example of that, you have this guy. This was a pharaoh of Egypt named Amasis. Now, he reigned from 570 to 526 BCE. And this is about 2,000 years after Erie. uh and I'm going to show you that during his time they still had specialized eye doctors, and the doctors in Egypt were better than anywhere else in the world. They all tell us this. But look, Amasis was a king of the 26th dynasty of ancient Egypt, a general who seized the throne during a revolt against King Aprius. Remember that name. The account of the 5th century BCE Greek historian Herodotus reveals Amasis as a shrewd and opportunistic ruler who, while promoting Greek trade with Egypt, strictly regulated it. So we have primary documents that attest to this guy. We actually have statues of him, which you're seeing right now, that is in the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore. But we also have descriptions of him by the Greek historian Herodotus. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the Greek historian Herodotus, see what he said about this particular king, and I'm going to show you how it ties into the topic of what I'm talking about now, of medicine and magic and eye doctors. Okay, eye doctors. I'm just showing you some of the history of eye doctors before I show you the eye doctor on the plantation. So this is the book that they're talking about with Herodotus, the histories. Now the crazy part is Herodotus is going to talk about Egyptian doctors. Right? Let me say that again. Herodotus is about to talk about Egyptian doctors. Now, Herodotus is a Greek. So I'm going to show you a Greek historian talking about Egyptian doctors. But in modern science and modern medicine, they try to say that a Greek named Hippocrates is the father of medicine. So how can the Greek Hippocrates, listen to me good, be the father of medicine if you have other Greeks telling you about doctors in other areas that predate him, right? Sometimes they manipulate history just to manipulate how our brains think. If I can control the information going into your brain, I can control how you think. I can control how you analyze situations. I can control how you see the world. So let's see an ancient Egyptian eye doctor being attested to by Herodotus, showing that the craft that we saw with Erie in 2400 BCE being passed down thousands and thousands of years to Amasis dynasty. Check this out. Herodotus says, it was against this Amasis that Cambyses, son of Cyrus, was preparing to wage war with an army of his other subjects, including Ionian and Aeolian Hellenes. Those are basically Greeks. He was marching against Egypt because of what happened after he had earlier sent a herald to ask Amasis for his daughter. He had made this request at the advice of an Egyptian doctor who resented Amasis for having chosen him out of all the physicians in Egypt to be delivered to Persia, and thus tearing him away from his wife and children. And this had occurred because Cyrus had sent a request to Amasis for the best physician in Egypt who specialized in the treatment of the eyes. It was because of this grievance that the Egyptian advised Cambyses to ask Amasis for his daughter. He hoped thereby that Amasis would either suffer anguish if he gave him to her or become the enemy of Cambyses if he did not. So in some of Egyptian history, the Persian ruler Cambyses waged war on ancient Egypt. Now, Herodotus has given us some information about why Cambyses waged war on ancient Egypt. He's saying because an Egyptian doctor that was living in Persia tricked him into doing it. Why did this Egyptian doctor, an Egyptian eye doctor, why did this Egyptian eye doctor trick him into doing it? Well, Cambyses is a descendant of King Cyrus. He's the son of King Cyrus the Great of Persia. Now, Cyrus went on a war campaign. He conquered many nations, and he brought in a era of prominence for the Persian Empire that lasted long after his death. If any of you ever seen the movie 300 and they talk about the Persian king Xerxes waging war on Greece and on Sparta particularly, Xerxes was a king of Persia. He wasn't a direct descendant of Cyrus, I don't believe, but he was in that line. But Cyrus is the one who laid a lot of groundwork. That's why he's called Cyrus the Great. So Cyrus, now get this, Cyrus conquered many nations in that area, right? And so when he had need for an eye doctor, he didn't get a Persian eye doctor. He didn't get a Babylonian eye doctor, although he had conquered Babylon. He didn't get a Syrian eye doctor. He didn't get a Greek eye doctor. He didn't get a Jewish eye doctor. He didn't get an Ethiopian eye doctor. His reach spread far and wide. Where did he get the eye doctor from? He got the eye doctor from Egypt because they had the best doctors, and their doctors specialized in several fields. So when Cyrus demanded to have a eye doctor from Egypt leave his homeland and come to Persia to be a doctor in Persia, this particular eye doctor was mad because he was the one chosen and he had to leave his wife and kids, and he was heartbroken for leaving his family, right? So when he was underneath the rule of Cambyses was just like Cyrus. He was a warmonger, and he was actually kind of crazy. He loved war. So this Egyptian eye doctor tell Cambyses, hey, you know what you should do to kind of prove you rule the world? You should make the Egyptian Pharaoh Amasis send you his daughter, so you can, have his daughter, marry his daughter, make him one of your concubines. That's what you should do to him to make him submit to you by giving you his daughter. And so Cambyses was like, you know what? That's a good idea. He tell Amasis to give him his daughter, but what Amasis does, he doesn't give him his daughter. He sends the daughter of the previous Pharaoh that he just defeated and overthrew. Cambyses find out it's not the real daughter. He's like, you know what? I'm going to wage war on Egypt. So that's that story right there. But the key takeaway is that it was known in Greece, because Herodotus mentions it, also in Persia, because Cyrus is the one asking for the eye doctor, but it was already known that the best doctors were in Egypt. Okay, so this magic and science, it has always existed, the mix between the two. And some of this information, now I'm not saying that Egyptian medicine is what was passed down to our ancestors on the plantation. I'm just showing you that doctors and eye doctors, medicine and magic being intertwined, this existed on the plantation for a long time. And it also existed on the plantation. I just want to show you what that looks like so you can really grasp what I'm telling you. When we're talking about hoodoo, magic, conjuring, root work, etc., we're also talking about medicine as well. Okay, so now let's get into the meat of this video. This is the particular ancestor that we're going to be talking about. And this is the ancestor who was actually healed of the blindness. So not only do we have a primary document talking about eye doctors on the plantation, I'm actually going to bring you the records of a man who was healed himself. Brooklyn Zoo says, Hotel King a Hotel family, good to see you. I hope all is well. As usual, thanks for tapping in, brother. Thanks for tapping in. So this is from the Slave Narratives of Texas, aka the Oral Histories of Texas. And this is O.W. Green. His actual name is Owen. So O.W. Green, son of Frank and Marianne Marks, was born in slavery at Bradley County, Arkansas, June 26, 1859. And so this is him talking about his life, talking about his experience during slavery, and talking about his experience during the Civil War, after the Civil War. And we're going to see exactly how and when he was cured from going blind. And the crazy part about it is the remedy was stolen. As we know, if our ancestors made any type of inventions while they were slaves or shortly after, a lot of their inventions were stolen. But it wasn't just inventions that were stolen, it was medical knowledge that was stolen as well. On one hand, they were saying that, oh, these Negroes are just superstitious. They believe in magic. It's all mumbo jumbo. But then on the other hand, they were taking that knowledge. They were creating medicine from that knowledge, and they were just taking the credit. And we're finna see a firsthand example of that right now. So look, the ancestor says, I was born in Arkansas. Frank Marks was my father, and Mary Ann Marks my mother. She was born on the plantation. I had two brothers. I don't remember the quarters, but they must have had plenty because they was 3,000 slaves on the plantation. Now that is a really large plantation. Okay, to have 2,000 to 3,000 slaves. I mean, that has to be one of the biggest probably in Arkansas. Look, he says, all my kin people belong to Massa Mobley. My grandfather was a millman, and they had one of the biggest grist mills in the country, which I can believe. They got one of the biggest grist mills in the country. Is ran by slaves. That's why they have so many slaves and they have so much money to own them all. He says, our master was good and we had plenty for to eat. There was no jail for slaves on our place, but not far from there was a jail. The Ku Klux Klan made everything pretty squally, so they taken the orphan children to Little Rock and keep them 2-3 years. Now pause. He's sort of jumping time periods. So what he's referring to is he tells us a little bit about the plantation he was on. He tells us a little bit about his parents. Now he's jumping to the Ku Klux Klan and the orphan children being taken to Little Rock. Now, I want you to understand the Ku Klux Klan didn't exist during slavery, right? They existed after the Civil War. And the Ku Klux Klan really grew out of the Democratic Party and what was known as the Patty Rollers. So when you hear about the Patty Rollers, those individuals who used to be the slave catchers, the Patty Rollers, who would force our ancestors to show a path whenever they saw them on the road somewhere, these individuals needed a new line of work now that black folk didn't need passes and who hated our ancestors. They formed groups like the Ku Klux Klan. So when he says the Ku Klux Klan made everything pretty squally, so they taken the orphan children to Little Rock and keep them 2-3 years. He's saying after the Civil War, the Ku Klux Klan was created, and the Ku Klux Klan, along with the Democratic Party, began attacking not only black people, but also attacking Republicans for trying to help black people during the time period that we know as Reconstruction. Now, these orphan children that he's talking about being taken to Little Rock. One thing I like to do whenever I'm reading you guys these stories to validate that this isn't mumbo jumbo. These oral histories aren't mumbo jumbo. They are historical documents. I like to show you guys supporting evidence to prove what our ancestors is saying is historically accurate. And I like to point out that I'm telling you, sometimes when you Google stuff about the time period of slavery and people and what they were doing, sometimes the source are these slave narratives. The source is this oral history, but they don't tell you that this is just the source. They just quote our ancestors' information. But let me show you some information about these orphan children in Little Rock. Check this out. Now, this is from the Cincinnati Daily Gazette, July 24th, 1866. Remember, the Civil War ended in 65. So after the Civil War ended, a lot of slave owners and a lot of people, they were killed and they were murdered. Families were broken up. So there was a situation in the South where there were a lot of widows and there were a lot of orphans. They were children who no longer had a father, because every child that was a slave, yes, they had a mother and father, but a lot of them didn't have mothers and fathers because they were snatched from their mothers and fathers and sold off. Then during the Civil War, a lot of slave owners went off to war, died, never came back, and they had some of their enslaved individuals go off to war with them, died, and never came back. And so you had a very, very rough time for a lot of individuals after the end of the Civil War. Now, these orphans that he's speaking about, he became one of these orphans because of the tragedies of the Civil War. Now, this is a report from the Freedmen's Bureau. Okay, they say the report states that great destitution and suffering still continues in many parts of Arkansas among the refugees. Most of them have made strenuous efforts to lift themselves from the condition of want into which the war brought them, but most of the widows and orphans are helpless, and their condition appeals to the charitable for help. So there were widows and there were orphans and there were people that lost everything during the Civil War right there in Arkansas and in other states in the South. But we're talking about Arkansas right now. Now, the ancestor that we're hearing from, he just so happened to be one of these orphans because he was so young when the Civil War took place. Now, let me take you directly to Little Rock, where he says he was an orphan at. Now, this was in the Philadelphia Press, September 6th, 1865. 1865. Look, the title says an appeal to the citizens of Philadelphia in behalf of the suffering people of the South. We're just going to look down to the highlighted portion. It says, in Little Rock, Arkansas, there are 800 helpless widows and orphans. In Little Rock, Arkansas, there are 800 helpless widows and orphans. And these helpless widows and orphans were also being targeted by the Ku Klux Klan. They were being lynched, they were being hung, they were being beat, they were being taken advantage of, and they were being mistreated, family. So when the ancestor says The Ku Klux made everything pretty squally. So they taken the orphan children to Little Rock and keep them 2 or 3 years. So these children in Little Rock, this is how the ancestor got to Little Rock as one of these orphan children, and it is there in Little Rock, Arkansas, that we're going to see the eye doctor applying what they learned on the actual plantation. So let's go a little further in the narrative. Look what else he says. He says there was lots of slaves in that country round Rob Roy and Free Nigger Ben. Old Churchill, who used to be governor, had a plantation in there. So why did I highlight that? Because this is more historical information that we can use to verify that the ancestor is telling the truth. We've already verified that these orphan children were actually taken to Little Rock to be kept for 2 or 3 years because the situation was so bad. They was appealing to other people in the north to help them out. So people from the north were sending money to the south to help out these widows and orphans, and you had people doing like missionary work, not necessarily on behalf of a deity, but they were working on behalf of humanitarian aid. And some of these people were going down to Little Rock, Arkansas to help these orphans. They were sending money and they were sending people to help these orphans. Remember that it's going to be important as we move forward. But look what he says. Old Churchill, who used to be governor, had a plantation in there. Is the ancestor historically accurate? Again, yes, he is. This is Thomas James Churchill, 1824 to 1905. Okay, we got the right name, we got the right time period. But was he a governor? And did he have a plantation in the area? Let's see. According to the Encyclopedia of Arkansas itself, they say that Thomas James Churchill was the 13th governor of Arkansas. They said he led advances in health and education while in office. Now, they give a lot of other accolades, but we're not going to really read about all of that because we only want to verify that there was a Churchill. He was a governor, okay? He was a governor of Arkansas. But look down at the bottom to the last line that I have highlighted. They want to tuck that away in the bottom of it, and they don't want to speak about it too much. But look, Churchill owned a plantation near Little Rock. I'm going to say it again. Churchill owned a plantation near Little Rock, and in 1857 was appointed postmaster of Little Rock by President James Buchanan. Now, a lot of these presidents prior to the Civil War owned slaves, and a lot of them were sympathetic to people who owned slaves. And a lot of people who held government positions were pro-slavery. That just is what it is. Okay. So again, the ancestor is 100% correct. Old Churchill was a governor of Arkansas, and this governor of Arkansas actually owned a plantation. Okay. Now they have to include this because we know the truth. We know the truth. So again, the ancestor is telling us the truth. We're verifying everything as we go because it's difficult to verify that somebody was healed when they were going blind, right? Stuff like that is difficult to verify. But if you can verify the other aspects of the story and show that this person has a propensity to tell the truth, then this is what lends credibility to the part of the story that you don't have the direct evidence for. That's why I do it like this. Look, he says, when I was 9 years old, they had the Bruce and Baxter Revolution. 'Twas more running than fighting. Bruce was elected for governor, but Baxter said he'd be governor if he had to run Brooks into the sea. So he's telling us about something else. He's telling us about something that he's calling the Bruce and Baxter Revolution. He's saying that Bruce was elected for governor, but Baxter said that he was going to be governor even if he had to run Brooks into the sea. So what we're looking at right here is a volatile political climate. And we're seeing people who they don't respect the rule of law. They don't respect the political democratic process. They don't respect the vote, right? This guy saying one guy was elected for governor, but another guy said, hey, he don't need to be governor. I need to be governor. So they literally went to war. Maybe not a war like the Civil War, but a revolution. They actually began fighting in order to take the seat of the governor. All of this is during what we call the Reconstruction era, the Reconstruction period. Now, remember, I keep telling you that the Ku Klux Klan was created by the Democrats, or Democrats created the Ku Klux Klan, to be more specific. Now, after the end of the Civil War, during the Reconstruction era, when they talk about the Reconstruction era, the Reconstruction period, what they're talking about is a restructuring of the American government to help the newly freed blacks. That's what's being reconstructed. And so you had the Republican Party who were trying to do the restructuring to help the newly freed blacks. Lincoln was a Republican, okay? But you also had those people who were still from these Confederate states. And you had these Democrats who were against blacks getting any kind of help after the end of the Civil War. Remember, they still felt like the blacks should be slaves, but they lost the war. So you literally had Republicans fighting Democrats over political seats because the Democrats were saying if these Republicans get in the office, they're going to do things that's going to help out the blacks. And the Republicans were saying, you know, hey, we need to get in the office. We need to keep these Democrats out because these Democrats are still low key fighting for the Confederate States. The South shall rise again. So the Democrats were against blacks, Republicans were for blacks, and they were also for themselves. Don't get me wrong. Everything they did was not to help the newly freed blacks. And so you had a lot of infighting. Now, all of the infighting wasn't just between Republicans and Democrats. It was just over political ideas, and it was just political chaos. Political chaos. Nobody was really respecting democracy at that point. But what he's talking about, he says Bruce. Now, I believe the interviewer wrote Bruce because he probably talked with slang, but what he was saying was Brooks, not Brooks. Okay, look, he says the Bruce and Baxter Revolution. What he's talking about is the Brooks and Baxter Revolution, always known as the Brooks and Baxter War. Now, this again came from the Encyclopedia of Arkansas. This is all documented history. Look what they say. The Brooks-Baxter War, which occurred during April and May of 1874, was an armed conflict between the supporters of two rivals for the governorship, Joseph Brooks and Alicia Baxter. The violence spilled out of Little Rock. Remember, we talking about Little Rock. The violence spilled out of Little Rock into much of the state and was resolved only when the federal government intervened. The result of the war, recognition of Alicia Baxter as the governor, brought a practical end to Republican rule in the state and thus ended the era of Reconstruction. So Reconstruction ended when the federal government capitulated and they said, look, okay, check this out. If we can come to some kind of agreement, because there were political wars, political fights, politicians were getting gunned down. They were actually having fights for political seats all over the South. The federal government said, okay, look, if the Republicans and the Democrats, the whites in America, if they can come to some kind of conclusion and stop fighting each other, then the Union said, okay, we'll pull the troops out of the South. And the Democrats, the racists, they were like, okay, that's a good concession because if you pull the troops out of the South, we can run crazy on these newly freed blacks. We can burn down their cities, we can burn down their towns, we can steal all their goods, and they will have no help. We can lynch them, and they will have no help. We can kill them, and they will have no help. They will be slaves in all but name. And so that's what ended the Reconstruction era because they were no longer attempting to reconstruct the government to help the newly freed blacks. They left them into the hands of the the upset Confederates who lost the war. Okay, so that's the historical context, and that's what the ancestor meant when he said, when I was 9 years old, they had the Bruce and Baxter Revolution. 'Twas more running than fighting. Bruce was elected for governor, but Baxter said he'd be governor if he had to run Brooks into the sea. So the supporters of both were going crazy. So we see that, again, the ancestor is giving us accurate history. So look at this. My young master, Jack Mobley, was killed in the war. Is how I come to be one of the orphan children. Okay, and that war again is the Civil War. He's not telling the story in a chronologically linear fashion. He's bouncing back and forth. So I'm giving you guys the history so you can follow what's happening. So the Civil War kicked off. The individual that was his young master was killed. A lot of people was killed. Death and destruction. People were left widows and people were left orphans. The Ku Klux Klan was formed. They started terrorizing Republicans and they started terrorizing the newly freed blacks. Republicans and Democrats were fighting each other. Reconstruction was going on, and this individual with a lot of other, according to one source, 800 women and children, widows and orphans, were taken to Little Rock, and they were known as the orphan children in Little Rock, Arkansas. Okay, so let's get on with the story. So look what O.W. Green goes on to say. While us orphan children was at Little Rock, there come a terrible soreness of the eyes. I heard tell 'twas caused from the cholera. Now, I don't think the disease was actually cholera, because I did a little research on it, and I don't believe it actually harms the eyes like that. But I could be wrong. I'm not a medical profession. Otto says, brother Ampu, hotel, shout out, brother. Good to see you in the building. I hope all is well. I hope all is well. So look, while these orphan children were at Little Rock, he says, there come a terrible soreness of the eyes. I heard tell 'twas caused from the cholera. Every little child had to take turns about sitting by the babies or toting them. I was so blind, my eyes were so sore, I couldn't see. The doctor's wife was working with us. She was trying to figure up a cure for our sore eyes, first using one remedy and then another. An old herb doctor told her about a herb he had used on the plantations to cure the slaves' sore eyes. So remember what I explained. You got these orphan children and these widows. You got them in Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, the conditions are extremely bad. They're living in squalor. They don't have enough to eat. They don't have changes of clothes. They don't have any money. So people in the northern states are requesting for humanitarian aid to be sent to the region. They want people to go that can help, and they want money to be sent to help. So whenever you have individuals living in quote unquote squalor or unclean conditions, poverty conditions, that's when a lot of diseases tend to spring up. So we see that when he says this doctor, the doctor's wife, these individuals came as part of that humanitarian aid. They came along with individuals bringing money to help these orphans that were talked about in the newspaper article. So you have a doctor and you have the doctor's wife there trying to help out as much as they can in this time period of poverty and disease and people being downtrodden, right? Now get this. Now I want you to pay attention. This woman is the doctor's wife. Her husband is a doctor. Now these are white people, right? Now she's trying to figure up a cure for the sore eyes. So obviously, for one, they don't 100% know what's wrong because they're assuming it may be cholera because there was an outbreak of that, but it may have been something else. And so this woman, the doctor's wife, she's trying one remedy, then she tries another, but nothing is seeming to help. So she's extending the knowledge, her medical knowledge to its limits. She's trying every remedy that she can but it's not working. So what does the ancestor say happens? An old herb doctor. Now, what is an herb doctor? That's hoodoo doctor. That's a root worker. That's a conjurer. Don't always think magic. Don't always think magic. These are medical practices. So an old herb doctor, a hoodoo doctor, a root worker, okay, a conjurer, an old herb doctor told her about an herb he had used on the plantations to cure the slave's sore eyes. So we see firsthand information that we have a root worker who practices hoodoo saying that, hey, well, look, I was the root worker on the plantation. When I was on the plantation, I've seen this before. I've seen this illness. This old herb doctor, this conjurer, was able to properly diagnose the disease. Listen to me, was able to properly diagnose the disease and provide the remedy. It was like, hey, look, go out there. We got to go out to the woods. We got to get this. We got to do this with it. And this is how we can heal it. Now, in order for them to listen to this ex-slave, means they had to be at the end of their rope. They did not know what to do. The doctor didn't know what to do. His wife didn't know what to do. But the root worker said, I've cured this before. So they listened to him. So look what they do. They boiled the herb. What herb? The herb that he told them to go get. They boiled the herb and put it on our eyes on a white cloth. So what they would do a lot of times, they would boil these herbs, they would mix them up, and apparently they had to have made some kind of paste or something like that that they put on the eyes like a poultice or some type of salve, rubbed it on the eyes, and then they bandaged the eyes up with a white cloth. Okay, the doctor's wife, watch this, the doctor's wife, after taking the medical advice of the hoodoo doctor, the doctor's wife had a little boy about my age. He would play with me and thought I was about hit. He would lead me around, then he would run off and leave me and see if I could see. One day, between 11 and 12 o'clock, I will never forget it, he taken me down to the mess room. The lady was not quite ready to dress my eyes, meaning that what would happen was the children that were suffering from this eye disease, who were going blind, they would get this medicinal salve placed on their eyes, and they would get the white cloth put on. They would wear it for a particular amount of time. Then they would have to go and get the white. You got to keep this stuff clean. They would get the cloth taken off. They would probably get their eyes clean. They would get the medicine. They would get the salve reapplied to the eyes. They would get a fresh washcloth put on, and then they would go back on about their day, and they would keep it for a certain amount of time. So look, he says, the lady was not quite ready to dress my eyes. She told me to go on and come back in a little while. When I got outside, I tore that old rag off my eyes and throwed it down. I told the little boy, oh, I can see. He grabbed me by the arm and ran yelling to his mammy, Mama, he can see. Mama, Owen can see. So this man, or he was a young man at the time, a child, when they told him that they didn't have time to dress his eyes, he just got tired of wearing that old rag. So he said, man, he just took the white cloth off. He took the rag off. He just threw it down. And when he opened up his eyes, magically now he can see. What they have been doing to treat his eyes had healed him. And so he was like, whoa, I can see, I can see, I can see. And the little boy, who was the son of the doctor and the doctor's wife, was like, oh man, you can see. He grabbed him by the arm, took him to his mama, the doctor's wife, and was like, Mama, look, Owen can see. Owen can see. He's been healed. So he says, I never will forget that word. They were all in so a rejoicing, excitable way. So everybody is like, oh my God, it worked, it worked, it worked. What the hoodoo doctor told us worked. The medicine worked. He can see, he can see. So then he says, I was the first one had his eyes cured. So if he was the first one, there was a second, there was a third, there was a fourth, there was a fifth. So he was the first one that had his eyes cured, but multiple people after that began to get their sight back from the medicine that the root worker had applied. Now look at this, man. Check this out. They sent the lady, the doctor's wife, to New York, and she made plenty of money from her remedy. Now look, it wasn't her remedy, family. This medical breakthrough wasn't hers, but she didn't mention this hoodoo worker not one bit. She went off once they seen that the cure worked. She forgot all about the humanitarian aid that was necessary in Little Rock, Arkansas. She took the knowledge. Okay, so this the herb. She to watch all of the steps. Okay, so what's that herb? Where you get that herb from? Oh, so we get that herb. Then what you do with it? You boil it. You boil it. What you mix it with? Oh, you mix it with that. Okay, you make a poultice. You make a salve. Okay, I see you. I see you. Okay, you apply it to the eyes. You put a rag on the eyes. Okay, I see you. I see you. You change out the rag every how many days? Okay, and then in about how much time you say it's gonna be cured? So it was like, oh my goodness, it works, it works. So they had wrote, I'm pretty sure that she wrote all this down in a notebook. Where you get the herb from, what it looked like, what the herb called, how long you boil it, wrote up the whole recipe for the remedy. Ran off to New York. She went all the way back to New York City, man. Left Arkansas, went all the way back to New York City and just started raking in the dough. So whenever they seen somebody that was suffering that particular eye disease, she sat back, her husband sat back. Now everybody thinking he's just a great doctor. He's just a great doctor that came up with this cure, and they just made all this money and they just got rich, and they probably lived like fat rats for the rest of their life. All right. Well, look, he says things sure was terrible, the war. They just driving us from the soldiers. There was lots of cholera. We was just bedded together like hogs. The Ku Klux Klan come behind the soldiers, killing and robbing. After 2 or 3 years in the camp with the orphans, my kin found me and took me home. My grandfather and uncle was in the fighting. My grandfather was a wagon man. The last trip he made, he come home bringing a load of dead soldiers to be buried. My grandfather told the people all about the war. He said it sure was terrible. When the war was over, the people just shouted for joy. The men and women just shouted for joy. 'Twas only because of the prayers of the colored people they was free, and the Lord worked through Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. And look what else, another little piece of information he gives us. He says, my old master was a doctor and a surgeon. He trained my grandmother. She worked under him 37 years as a nurse. When old master wanted grandmother to go on a special case, he would whip her so she wouldn't tell none of his secrets. Grandmother used herbs for medicine, black snake root, sarsaparilla, blackberry briar roots, and nearly all the young'uns she fooled with, she saved from diarrhea. Now I want y'all to really think about something. Did his old master teach his grandmother this for 37 years? Or now, if he was a doctor, of course he had to have some type of medical knowledge. I'm not denying that. But did he teach her all that she knew? Really think about that. When we know that our ancestors were already using these herbs themselves on the plantation, it was part of their spiritual tradition, right? And then why would this old master, why would he whip the grandmother not to tell the secrets when she went on a particular case? Because if he was a doctor, he had to have went to school to be a doctor. If he was a surgeon, he had to have gone to school to be a surgeon, right? He had to learn how to do what he did. So whatever he knew, everybody pretty much already knew that. So what information did he have that he was trying to keep secret? Obviously, the information that he was trying to keep secret was the information that he learned from the grandmother. She was telling him whenever he would hit an impasse and he didn't know what to do, the grandmother was like, okay, well, look, these the herbs that you use for that. You get your black snake root and do this. You get the sarsaparilla and you do this. You get the blackberry briar roots and you do this. Because she was the doctor, the hoodoo worker, the conjure worker to all of the youngest on the plantation. She was already doing this because, again, this was intimately connected to our ancestors' spiritual system. So again, we see another instance of a doctor who took under his wing the root worker, the hoodoo doctor, and they took on one hand, they said to the world that hoodoo was superstition, hoodoo was useless magic, hoodoo was foolishness, root work was foolishness. But then the real world applications that wasn't hocus pocus, that wasn't just spells, that was actually um um things that could be used for medicinal purposes, the real medicinal purposes. They took that knowledge and they made medicine off of that knowledge, and they made money and fortunes off of that knowledge. There are, listen to me good, there are medical breakthroughs that have existed in this country, and those medical breakthroughs are the result of someone who practiced hoodoo. You must understand that. See, it wasn't just technical inventions like the cotton gin or the steam engine, right? It wasn't just those type of inventions that they stole. It was also medical inventions, medicine that they stole, right? And we have the documented evidence to prove it. So again, this man's grandmother was a hoodoo worker, was a root worker, and this doctor, the old master, the doctor and the surgeon, he would whoop her to make sure that she didn't tell anybody else what she told him, so he could be the only one with that knowledge. And so look, let's go on with the rest of his story. Let the ancestors speak, and we're gonna wrap this up. So then he says, my old master was good, but when he found you shouting, he burnt your hand. My good mother said he burnt her hand several times. Master wouldn't let the colored folks have meeting, but they would go out in the woods in secret to pray and preach and shout. I just picked up enough reading to read my Bible and scratch my name. I went to school one morning and didn't get along with the teacher, so I didn't go no more. I remember my folks had big times come Christmas. They never did work on Sundays, just sit around and rest. They never worked in bad weather, and they never did go to the field till 7 o'clock. I married in 1919. I have two stepdaughters and one stepson. My stepson lives in San Antonio. I have six step grandchildren, and I was a member of the Baptist church before you was born, lady. Meaning the interviewer that he's giving his information to, he's saying that he was a member of the Baptist church before that even happened. So again, what we've been talking about is medicine and magic and hoodoo practices, eye doctors on the plantation. I showed you guys that the connection between science and magic goes back thousands and thousands of years. And the same people who were in charge of the spiritual practices, even all the way back in ancient Egypt, the people in charge of the spirituality, they were also in charge of the medicine. They were also in charge of that they were the doctors. Okay. And that idea is the exact same idea in hoodoo. The people that was in charge of like the spirituality, dealing with the spirits, etc., they also dealt with the medicine, the root work, the herbs, all of that. It wasn't hocus pocus. A lot of that was actually medicine used to treat fevers, eye diseases, stomach diseases, cut limbs, sore limbs, bruises, abrasions, arthritis, any type of disease that you could come up with. When individuals got sick, they went to somebody that was practicing hoodoo, and there have been medical breakthroughs in this country that can be directly linked to someone who is practicing hoodoo. But the individual that was practicing hoodoo does not get the credit. We only hear about hoodoo in like a disrespectful context, where it's just like, oh, there's, that's superstition, that's mumbo jumbo, there's nonsense, there's devil worship. It's always something negative. So I just wanted to share with you guys some of the positive aspects of it. So again, this has been medicine and magic and hoodoo practices, eye doctors on the plantation. As usual, I hope you heard something that you never heard before. And if you did hear something that you've heard before, I hope I was able to shed more light on the topic. And I hope I gave you guys a deeper insight to what hoodoo actually is. This your brother Matthew Daniels, aka I'm Pooh, aka the Chosen Few, aka the real bookworm. But I'm not just a bookworm world, I am the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. I'm doing the book game like it ain't never been done before. And I'm doing the book game like it'll probably never be done again. May your name live on forever. And may your memory family, never die. Hotel, I'm out.